The basement door slammed behind me, still humming with the click of a lock my daughter-in-law thought I couldn't hear. Still, I ran my hand along the stone wall, slow, steady, like a mother-in-law taught to survive silence. As the smell of damp concrete thickened, I heard her upstairs rehearsing my decline like it was a script. While the same air pressed closer, I remembered, I built this house when she was still learning how to lie. The same woman who married my son just tried to seal me behind her story. That's when I opened the second door and let her plan collapse from my side. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The evening had settled quietly over the house, an unusual stillness filling the air. Martha sat in her favorite chair by the window, the soft hum of the ceiling fan the only sound breaking the silence. She'd spent the day reading, the warmth of the sun casting a peaceful glow over the room. But when Emily entered, that tranquility shifted. "Martha," Emily said, her voice soft but insistent, "I think it's better if you stay in the basement for a while. You've been looking a little fragile lately." Martha furrowed her brow, surprised by the comment. "Fragile, what do you mean?" she asked, her confusion clear. "Oh, just for your safety," Emily said, her tone as smooth as it had always been, yet laced with something Martha couldn't quite place. "It's quieter down there and I think it'll be easier for you. Fewer stairs to climb, less movement, just for a little while, okay?" Martha hesitated, her mind racing. She hadn't felt fragile, not in the way Emily was implying, but the concern in Emily's voice tugged at her. Maybe this was just a precaution. Maybe Emily was right, maybe it would be safer for her. "All right," Martha said finally, though doubt lingered. "I'll go down for a bit." The basement was nothing more than a storage space, cold and unwelcoming, but she followed Emily to the door without argument. Emily's smile was reassuring, but it didn't reach her eyes. She opened the basement door and gestured for Martha to step in. "Just for a little while," Emily repeated, her voice strangely soft, almost coaxing. Martha walked slowly down the stairs, the familiar smell of old wood and dust greeting her. The door behind her clicked shut and she turned around, expecting Emily to follow. Instead, there was a faint, unsettling sound, the unmistakable click of a lock turning. Martha's heart skipped a beat. She pressed her hand against the cold wood of the door, testing the handle. Locked. "Emily," she called out, but the only answer was silence. She stood there for a moment, her pulse quickening. Was this really for her safety? Her mind churned with unease. The basement, the lock, it all felt off. Safety or control? The thought gnawed at her. She looked around the basement, the shadows of old furniture and boxes casting long, eerie shapes on the walls. It was colder here, darker, isolated. She hadn't spent much time in the basement over the years, and being alone in the dim space now felt wrong. The walls seemed to close in on her, as if the house itself were pressing down on her. Martha tried to steady her breathing. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe Emily truly believed this was the best thing for her. It was just a precaution, after all, a little rest, away from the chaos of the house. But as she stood there, the sound of footsteps upstairs reached her ears. Emily's, probably, but no one came to check on her, no one even called down to make sure she was all right. Martha pressed her ear to the door, listening for any sign of movement. There was nothing, just the eerie quiet of the house. She felt a growing knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Why had Emily locked her in here? She took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she became. This wasn't just about safety. Something was off. Something about Emily's calm insistence, the smooth way she'd handled it all, made Martha feel like a prisoner. She didn't know what game Emily was playing, but Martha was starting to see the cracks in her facade. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the door. She could feel the weight of the lock on the other side, its presence heavy and menacing. The door might be locked, but she was. She would wait and see how this all unfolded. Martha's days in the basement passed in a slow, monotonous fog. The space was cold and unnervingly silent. She spent most of her time pacing around, flicking through old magazines and gazing at the forgotten boxes that seemed to multiply in the shadows. She'd never liked the basement, but now it felt like a cage, each minute stretching longer than the last. Every creak of the floor above her made her stomach twist, every muffled both her head sending ripples of unease through her. She tried not to think about why she was here. She tried to convince herself it was just temporary, just for her safety. But the more she stayed in that dark space, the more the seed of suspicion began to sprout in her mind. It was the third day when it happened. Martha had been sitting on the old armchair in the corner of the basement, staring at the faint light filtering through the small basement window when she heard the voices. Quiet at first, but clear enough for her to catch the words. "Luke, it's better this way." Emily's voice was sharp yet controlled. "She's becoming a liability." Martha's pulse quickened. She edged closer to the basement stairs, her heart hammering as the conversation drifted downward. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words hung in the air, sharp like a slap to the face. "She's been slow, she's not the same, it's in her best interest." Emily continued, her tone persuasive, almost soothing. "You know this, she's not capable of managing on her own anymore." Martha stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, her hand gripping the railing as the truth began to sink in. A liability? She wasn't sure whether she was more shocked by the coldness of Emily's words or the realization that Luke hadn't even protested. His silence spoke volumes. "She's still our mother," Luke finally replied, though his voice was distant, almost apologetic. I don't know what to do, Em. You're right, it's been hard on all of us. But..." Martha's stomach churned at the way Luke trailed off. His hesitation was enough to tell her everything she needed to know. Emily had been leading him, guiding him, without him even realizing it. She was starting to push Martha further and further into the margins of their lives. Martha felt a pang of hurt, deep and unexpected. She'd always known that Emily didn't care for her the way family should, but hearing it so plainly, hearing how easily Emily dismissed her, stung in a way she hadn't expected. Liability. The word echoed in her mind. It had been there, creeping under the surface for weeks now, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real, made it undeniable. She wasn't just an inconvenience to Emily, she was a problem to be solved, a weakness to be removed. As the days passed, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Martha replayed every interaction with Emily, the subtle ways she had undermined her, chipped away at her authority. The way Emily had always made little comments, asking her not to do things because it was too much for her, as if she couldn't handle simple tasks. The way she had stepped in, taking over family decisions that used to be Martha's domain, her rightful place. Martha's mind churned with these memories, each one now tinged with doubt. There were moments when she had brushed off the growing discomfort in her gut, moments when she had excused Emily's behavior as just her way of being helpful, of being concerned. But now, in the silence of the basement, all those little moments stacked up, forming a clear picture of manipulation. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the worn armchair, her knuckles pale in the dim light. This wasn't about safety, this wasn't about care, it was about control. The thought rang in her ears, louder than the thudding of her heart. She wasn't here because she was fragile, she was here because Emily had plans and Martha was in the way. Martha stood up, her legs stiff from sitting too long, and walked toward the door. She grasped the doorknob, testing it once more as if willing herself to break free, but the lock held firm just as it had before. A new, cold resolve settled over her. Emily had made a mistake, she had underestimated Martha. This wasn't over. Martha turned away from the door, her eyes narrowing as she began to formulate her next move. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and it was only a matter of time before it would grow into something much stronger. She wasn't just going to wait anymore, she was going to fight. Martha's patience had worn thin. The days in the basement had become unbearable, the air thick with isolation, but today something in her snapped: the door, the lock, the control. She stood before the basement door, her fingers trembling slightly as they grasped the cold, tarnished knob. A strange calm washed over her as she twisted it, and to her surprise, the door opened effortlessly. She paused, heart pounding in her chest, unsure for a moment if Emily had intended for her to stay locked in forever. But no, there it was, freedom quietly handed to her like a test she hadn't been told to take. Martha crept up the basement stairs, the soft creak of the wood barely audible in the thick silence of the house. The sounds from above, the murmurs of voices, grew clearer as she neared the top. She couldn't make out the words just yet, but the cadence, the familiarity of the voices sent a chill through her. "Emily, Luke." "Martha." felt the knot in her stomach tighten. She knew she had to be careful. This wasn't just about sneaking around. This was about gathering the truth. She pressed her ear against the wall, her breath shallow, straining to hear. "She's been getting worse, Luke," Emily's voice, low and controlled, carried through the air. "Her mind isn't what it used to be." Martha's pulse raced. She could hear the steady rhythm of Luke's voice in response, but it was distant, almost distant enough to make it sound like a muted echo. "It's just, she doesn't seem like herself lately. She's not making sense half the time," Emily continued, her words deliberately soft, carefully calculated. "It's for her own good. She doesn't need to be making decisions anymore. She's not capable." Martha's grip tightened on the doorframe as if it could anchor her to something solid in the midst of this storm. Capable? The word hit her with the force of a slap. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Emily wasn't just isolating her, she was discrediting her. Her own son, her own flesh and blood, was listening. No arguments, no defense, just silence. Luke's voice broke through the air again, though quieter now, as though the weight of his own discomfort was sinking in. "I don't know, I mean, she's still Mom. I feel like we should." Emily's voice cut through quickly. "She's your mother, Luke, and that's why this is hard, but the truth is she's a liability now. She's not the woman she used to be." Martha's heart constricted in her chest. A liability. The words stung sharper this time because they weren't just meant for her, they were meant to convince Luke. Emily was weaving a narrative, one that painted her as something to be sidelined, something less than the mother and matriarch she once was, and Luke was buying into it. She remembered family gatherings, how in the past she'd been the one to handle decisions. The dinners, the holiday plans, the house repairs, the finances. She had been the rock, the one with clear answers, the one the family turned to. But now it felt as though that role was slipping away from her like sand through her fingers. Her thoughts raced as the truth settled over her like a heavy blanket. Emily had been careful, methodical. She had started this game long before the basement, long before locking her away. She had been undermining Martha's authority in subtle, insidious ways, just enough to make Martha doubt herself, to make her question her place in her own family. Martha took a slow, steadying breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. She had to confront Emily, but not yet, not until she had a clear strategy. She needed more. She needed to know exactly how deep this manipulation ran, how far Emily was willing to go to push her out. Martha turned away from the door, her mind racing with plans. This wasn't about defending herself anymore. This was about taking back control. She wasn't going to be treated like a liability. She was going to make them see her. And when the time was right, she would make Emily regret underestimating her. The confrontation had been building in Martha for days, weeks maybe. She had sat quietly, gathering her thoughts, waiting for the right moment. But now, standing in the living room, her resolve had solidified. She was done being passive. Emily had crossed a line, and Martha wasn't going to let it slide any longer. Carla's support echoed in her mind. "You can't let her control you, Martha. You have to take your power back." With that reminder, she squared her shoulders and took a steadying breath. Today, she was going to face Emily head-on. Emily entered first, her usual calm facade in place, though Martha caught a flicker of unease in her eyes. She smiled brightly, a little too brightly, as if everything was perfectly fine. "Martha, there you are," Emily said, her tone light as if nothing was wrong. "I'm so glad you're up, feeling better today." Martha didn't answer right away. She studied Emily closely, looking for any sign of vulnerability, but all she saw was the same practiced concern, the same manipulation. "I'm not here to talk about how I'm feeling," Martha said, her voice calm but unyielding. "I want to talk about the basement. Why was I locked down there? What was that about?" Emily blinked, clearly taken aback by the directness, but it was only a momentary lapse. Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Martha, please," Emily began, her voice smooth, almost too gentle. "You know it's for your own good. You've been struggling. I just thought it would be better for you to rest in the basement, away from the noise." Martha felt her chest tighten. "Rest," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You locked me in, Emily. You didn't even give me a choice." "Oh, don't make this into something it's not," Emily said, her words soft but cutting. "I was just trying to keep you safe. You've been a bit off lately. We all know you're not what you said to be." The words stung more than Martha had expected, but she wasn't going to back down. Not what I used to be, she repeated, her voice sharper now. Is that what this is? You think I'm a liability? Emily's smile never wavered. Martha, please don't take this the wrong way. It's just that you're not in a place to be making decisions anymore. You've been a little unstable. Martha's heart pounded in her chest. Unstable. The word sat like a stone in her stomach. Emily wasn't just isolating her physically, she was trying to strip her of her agency, her worth. And the worst part, Luke wasn't saying anything. He stood off to the side, arms folded, eyes glued to the floor. His silence cut deeper than anything Emily had said. Unstable? Martha's voice cracked with hurt. You locked me away and told Luke I was unstable, a liability. All this time I've been the one keeping this family together, the one making decisions, and now you, she stopped herself, her breath shaky. You want to take that from me. Emily stepped closer, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I'm doing what's best for you, we're just looking out for you, Martha. Martha stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. You mean you and Luke, because clearly Luke doesn't have a problem with any of this. Luke finally lifted his head, but his eyes never met hers. He looked away quickly, shifting uncomfortably. Martha's stomach twisted with betrayal. She had always believed in her son, trusted him to see through Emily's manipulations, but now he stood silent, complicit in her silence. Emily smiled again as if she'd won. Martha, it's not personal, we're just trying to do what's best for you. Martha shook her head, her anger surging. You're not doing this for me, you're doing it for you. The truth hung in the air between them. Martha had come into this room ready to reclaim her power, but now she realized it was more than that. It was about showing Emily and Luke that Martha was far from the fragile woman they tried to make her believe she was. Without another word, Martha turned on her heel and walked away. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. The conversation with Emily had left Martha raw, but it had also ignited something else within her, a spark of clarity. She knew now that Emily wasn't just trying to isolate her physically, she was trying to erase her, to diminish her place in the family, to make her irrelevant. But Martha wasn't going to fade away, not this time. The next few days felt like a quiet storm. Martha stayed in the house, but she watched more carefully now. She began to listen not just to the words spoken aloud, but to the way Emily maneuvered behind the scenes. It didn't take long before Martha found the first piece of evidence. It was a casual text message sent from Emily to someone, and though the name was hidden behind the number, the words made Martha's stomach twist. She's becoming too fragile. I don't think it's safe for her to make decisions anymore. It's time to start moving her into a care facility. Martha stared at the screen, the words punching through her like a slap to the face. It was exactly what she had suspected. Emily had been planning this all along. Every concern, every comment about Martha's fragility had been part of a strategy. The realization was like ice water in her veins. Emily had been systematically undermining her, manipulating Luke, making Martha seem like a liability. It was one thing for Emily to say those things in private, but seeing them in writing made it all the more real. Martha didn't stop there. The next day she found more emails between Emily and a local care facility. They weren't just discussing general information, they were making plans. Emily had already begun the process of moving Martha into a place she didn't want to be, a place Martha didn't need. The evidence was piling up. Every conversation, every subtle undermining comment was now a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Martha sat down at the kitchen table, the pile of printouts in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve was firm. She couldn't ignore this any longer. Emily's plan wasn't just about controlling the house, it was about taking away everything Martha had worked for. It was about taking away her home, her finances, her family. Her breath hitched as a new thought settled over her. What if Emily wasn't just trying to get rid of her? What if there was more? What if Emily had designs on her assets, on everything Martha had built over the years? Martha knew it was time to take the next step. She couldn't confront Emily again without knowing how far this had gone. She needed to protect herself. She called Carla that afternoon, her voice steady but urgent. Carla, I need your help. I've found more evidence. Emily's been planning to get me out of the house into a care facility, and I think she's been trying to take control of my finances. I don't know what to do next.
Carla.
A's voice was immediate, full of concern. Martha, you're doing the right thing. This is serious. You need to see a lawyer. We need to figure out what your rights are. We need to protect you before Emily does any more damage. Martha felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Carla was right. It was time to fight back to protect her own future. The next day, Martha walked into the lawyer's office, her heart heavy but her mind clear. As the lawyer went through the paperwork, she felt a surge of power. This wasn't just about the basement or Emily's control anymore. This was about Martha taking control of her own life, her own destiny. But as she left the office, clutching the legal documents, another thought gnawed at her. What would Emily do when she found out that Martha had started fighting back? Martha didn't know, but she was ready to find out. Martha sat in her car, the engine running, but she didn't move. Her hands rested on the wheel, fingers drumming anxiously as she stared at the police station. Every doubt from the past week seemed to press on her chest now. What if they don't take me seriously? What if they think I'm just paranoid, imagining things? She had to remind herself why she was here. Emily's manipulations had become more than just uncomfortable, they were dangerous. Martha had watched as Emily steadily took control, using her influence to isolate and undermine her at every turn. And now Martha was going to fight back, starting with getting someone outside her family to listen. The thought of confronting the law seemed daunting, but it was the only option left. If anyone could help, it was Officer Ryan. He was the only one who seemed willing to look beyond the family dynamics. At least, that's what she hoped. She took a steadying breath, opened the door, and stepped into the station. Officer Ryan looked up from his desk as she entered. His expression was polite but guarded. He'd spoken with her once before, briefly, when she'd first mentioned the escalating tension in her home. Now she needed him to understand the truth of it. "Ms. Jenkins," he greeted her, setting down his paperwork. "What can I do for you today?" Martha hesitated, then sat across from him. "It's about Emily, my daughter-in-law," she began, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "I think she's trying to control my life. I've found evidence that she's trying to push me out of my home and make decisions for me, decisions I don't want." Ryan's eyebrows raised slightly, but his demeanor remained calm. "What kind of evidence are we talking about?" Martha pulled out the printed messages and emails she had uncovered, her fingers trembling slightly as she slid them across the desk. Emily's been sending messages to a care facility discussing plans to move me into a home. She's been telling Luke that I'm too fragile to make decisions for myself. But it's all lies, officer. I'm not fragile, I'm not weak." Ryan took a moment to scan the documents. "I see," he murmured, "but Ms. Jenkins, this sounds more like a family dispute than something criminal." Martha's stomach twisted, but she pressed on. "I understand how it might seem, but I'm telling you, this isn't just about a disagreement. It's about control. Emily's trying to take my home, my finances, everything I've worked for. If I don't act now, I'll have nothing left." Ryan looked at her, his expression softening. "I'll admit it's a bit tricky without concrete proof of criminal activity, but I'll look into it. I can talk to Luke, see if he's noticed anything. It's a start." Martha felt a flicker of hope. At least someone was listening. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little less steady than before. "I'm just afraid it's going to get worse." "I understand," Ryan said, standing up. "We'll get this sorted, Ms. Jenkins. I'll keep you updated as soon as I can." As Martha left the station, a quiet sense of relief began to settle over her. She wasn't completely alone in this fight anymore, but as she reached her car, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Luke. "Mom, Emily says you're making this into a bigger deal than it is. Please just let it go. I don't want any more drama." Martha stared at the words, drama, that's what Luke called it. Emily had managed to make everything seem trivial, even when it was her life on the line. Martha's resolve hardened. The fight was far from over. Emily had underestimated her, and now Martha had someone in her corner, someone who wasn't family. But she also knew that Emily's next move would come soon, and when it did, she'd be ready. The days after Martha's meeting with Officer Ryan passed in a blur of quiet tension. Emily's presence in the house had become suffocating, her manipulations more calculated with each passing day. At first, Martha had hoped that the mere act of reaching out for help would have made a difference, that Emily would back off. But the opposite was happening. Emily was pushing harder, tightening her grip. It started It's small things. At family meals, Emily would make comments that subtly excluded Martha from decisions. She'd speak over her, nodding to Luke and deferring to him, making sure Martha knew she wasn't needed. It was like an invisible wall was being erected between them, one word at a time. Luke, we really should just go ahead and hire someone to take care of things around here. It's just too much for Martha to handle, Emily would say, her voice smooth, soothing, as if everything was perfectly normal. Martha clenched her fists beneath the table, watching Luke's passive acceptance of Emily's words. It wasn't just about isolating her anymore, it was about cutting her out completely. One evening, Emily cornered Luke in the kitchen, whispering so Martha couldn't hear, but Martha could still see the way Emily's lips moved, the way Luke nodded in agreement. It was another decision made without her, another choice she had no say in. Luke, Martha said, her voice firm, stepping into the kitchen. What's going on? Why are you letting her make these decisions without consulting me? Luke barely looked up, busy with the dishes. I'm just helping, Mom. It's easier this way. Emily's right. We all have to be practical. You've been overwhelmed. Martha felt the sting of his words, the sharp edge of betrayal. He wasn't seeing what Emily was doing. He was helping her, helping Emily isolate me. I'm not overwhelmed, Luke, Martha snapped. I don't need anyone making decisions for me. Not her, not you. I can take care of myself. Luke's gaze flickered to hers for just a moment before he sighed and shook his head. Please, just let this go. Emily's only trying to help. His words cut deeper than any accusation Emily had thrown at her. It was as if Martha no longer had a place in her own family, as if she had become an afterthought, a mere inconvenience. She stood in the kitchen, feeling the walls close in around her. But she wouldn't back down, not this time. Later that week, Emily took things a step further. She blocked Martha's invitations to family gatherings, telling her that it was better if she stayed home and rested. Martha's own granddaughter, Hannah, called confused. Grandma, why aren't you coming to the party? Mom said you're not feeling well. Martha swallowed the bitter taste of isolation. It wasn't about rest, it was about control. Emily was doing everything she could to push Martha further out, to rewrite her place in the family until there was nothing left for her. She called Carla that night, her voice strained with frustration. Carla, she's doing it again. Emily's pushing me out. I'm not even invited to family things anymore. It's like I don't even exist to them. Carla's voice was a steady anchor in the storm. Martha, she's isolating you, cutting you off from everyone. You need to stand firm. Don't let her win. Martha took a deep breath, looking out the window as the sky turned dark. She wasn't going to let Emily turn her life into a prison. The next day, Martha made a decision. She would confront Emily again, but this time she would do it differently. She had already taken steps to protect herself. Now it was time to make Emily understand that she was not going to be manipulated any longer. This was no longer just about small moments of rebellion. This was war. Martha began to plan her next move, every step calculated. She would find a way to expose Emily's manipulations, to take back what was rightfully hers. It wasn't just about defending her home anymore, it was about defending her dignity, her identity. She knew the confrontation would be bigger this time. Emily wouldn't be able to hide behind her sweet smiles and soft words. Martha was ready to tear down the walls Emily had built around her. And when the time came, Emily wouldn't have a chance. The air in the house had become suffocating, thick with the weight of unspoken things. Martha knew Emily was planning something. She had been waiting for this moment, watching for the next step in Emily's relentless game of control. It had only been a matter of time before Emily would make her move, and today it was finally happening. Martha, Emily's voice echoed from the kitchen, her tone too sweet, too insistent. It's really for your own good. I think it's time you rest in the basement again. You've been getting so stressed lately. We all want to make sure you're comfortable. Martha felt the familiar knot of anxiety twist in her stomach. She had seen this coming. She could hear the false concern in Emily's voice, the same manipulative tone that had been used to lock her away before. But this time, Martha's resolve was ironclad. Without a word, she followed Emily to the basement door. Emily was smiling, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but Martha didn't flinch. She wasn't going to fight back this time. Instead, she stepped into the basement, her movements deliberate, controlled. Emily followed her down the stairs and with a click locked the door behind her. Martha could feel the familiar chill of the basement settle around her, the dark corners pressing in, but she wasn't afraid. This time she had a plan. The lock clicked into place, but Martha didn't panic. She walked over to the door, her fingers tracing the cool metal of the handle. She had learned the hard way that the door could be opened from the inside, and she knew it would be her key to freedom. With a steady breath, she turned the handle and the door swung open effortlessly. She paused for a moment, listening for any sound from upstairs. The house was quiet. Without hesitation, Martha left the basement and walked up the stairs, her heart thumping but her steps calm. When she reached the top, she found Emily in the living room, her back to her. Luke was sitting nearby, his eyes cast downward, looking distant like he had been for days. Martha cleared her throat, and both Emily and Luke turned. "Luke," Martha said, her voice low but strong, "it's time we talked." Emily's smile faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "Martha, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know we're just trying to help you." "No," Martha cut in, her voice unwavering. "You've been trying to control me, Emily. You've been isolating me, undermining me, and trying to take everything I've worked for. I have the proof." Martha pulled out the stack of evidence, texts, emails, printed messages, and placed them in front of Luke. His eyes darted to the papers, confusion flickering across his face. "Read it," Martha urged, her voice tight with frustration. "This is what she's been doing behind your back." Luke slowly picked up the papers, his gaze shifting between them. Emily stood frozen, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. For a long moment no one spoke. The silence in the room was thick with tension, and then, as Luke's eyes read the words, his face shifted. His expression slowly changed from confusion to disbelief, and finally to something more, something like regret. I didn't know," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. Emily's facade cracked in that instant. Her smile faltered, the calm mask slipping as she stepped forward, voice rising in defensiveness. "Luke, this is ridiculous. She's making everything into something it's not. You can't believe her." But Luke didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on Martha, his expression now full of a mixture of guilt and shock. He hadn't seen it before. He hadn't realized the extent of Emily's manipulation. Martha took a step forward, her voice steady but cutting. "You've been pushing me out, Luke, making me feel like I don't belong, and you never even saw it. You let her do it." Luke didn't answer. He couldn't. His silence was louder than any words he might have spoken. And in that moment, Martha knew she had won. The game had changed. Emily's carefully constructed world was starting to crumble, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Martha felt like she could breathe again. The tension in the room was suffocating. Martha stood, her posture straight and unwavering, as the weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. Luke, still reeling from the truth he had just uncovered, stared at the papers in his hands, his face unreadable. Emily, standing across from them, fidgeted uncomfortably, her usual composure now slipping. For the first time in a long while, Martha could feel the control slipping from Emily's grasp. The doorbell rang. It was Officer Ryan. Martha's heart leapt in her chest. She had called him earlier that morning after the confrontation, and now it was time for Emily's actions to be exposed. The truth was no longer just her word against Emily's, now it had the weight of law behind it. Ryan entered the living room, his presence calm but assertive. He took a quick glance at the scene before him, noting the tense silence, the papers scattered across the table, and the uncomfortable way Emily was standing. Without a word, he turned to Martha. "Martha, can you walk me through everything again?" Officer Ryan's voice was even, professional. He had seen many situations like this before, but something in the air felt different. He could sense the weight of the family dynamic, the manipulation at play. Martha took a steadying breath and began recounting everything once more: the basement, the texts, the emails, the way Emily had slowly pushed her out of her own life. She described it all in careful detail, making sure there was no room for doubt. As she spoke, Emily's face tightened, her mouth pressing into a thin line. "I have all the evidence here," Martha finished, gesturing to the papers on the table. "She's been systematically isolating me, trying to take control of my finances, my decisions. This isn't just about care, officer, this is manipulation." Emily stepped forward, her voice rising in protest. "This is absurd. Martha's just blowing things out of proportion. I was only trying to help. She's too fragile to manage on her own, she." "Martha," Officer Ryan cut her off, holding up a hand. "Let's stick to the facts here. Emily, you've been presented with evidence. Can you offer a reasonable explanation for your actions?" Emily faltered, her defenses crumbling under the weight of Ryan's gaze. Her usual charm, the smooth, practiced tone, was slipping. She hesitated, eyes darting to Luke, who was still staring at the papers with growing disbelief. I was trying to make sure she's safe," Emily stammered, but even she could hear the weakness in her voice. Ryan didn't buy it. "Emily, these actions go beyond concern. You've been orchestrating a process to remove Martha from her home without her consent. That's not helping, that's coercion." Martha's heart raced as Ryan's words hung in the air. For the first time, Emily had no answer. Her facade had cracked, and now everyone could see the truth. Luke looked up, his face pale, the weight of his own complicity pressing down on him. I didn't know," he whispered, barely audible. "I didn't see it. I thought you were just helping, but I didn't see it." Martha's breath caught in her throat. The pain of his words, of his failure to protect her, was almost unbearable, but there was something else too. There was a flicker of hope. Luke was finally waking up, finally seeing what Emily had done to their family. "Luke," Martha said softly, her voice steady despite the rush of emotion. "I've been trying to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. You've been so blind to what's been happening right in front of you." Luke's eyes filled with regret. He didn't know what to say, but it was clear he was realizing just how much he had failed his mother. The guilt was evident, and Martha could see it, though the damage couldn't be undone. Officer Ryan stepped forward, his presence grounding the tension in the room. "I'll be taking a full report and we'll be following up with a thorough investigation. This isn't over, Emily." Emily's face turned red with fury, but she couldn't muster a response. She was cornered now, and she knew it. With one final glance at the papers on the table, Ryan turned to Martha. "We'll make sure you're protected, Ms. Jenkins. You're not alone in this anymore." Martha nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long while she felt a real sense of hope. The battle was far from over, but now at least she had the strength to fight back and people on her side who would help her see it through. The following days were a blur of motion, like a heavy storm finally breaking. Officer Ryan had assured Martha that the investigation was moving forward, that the truth would be brought to light. His words had anchored her in a sea of uncertainty, but Martha knew the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. Emily had made it clear she wasn't going down quietly. That afternoon, as Martha sat at the kitchen table, she could feel the weight of decisions pressing on her. The evidence was undeniable now. Emily's manipulations, her attempts to isolate Martha, they were all part of a larger plan, a plan that was no longer going to succeed, not if Martha had anything to say about it. Martha picked up the phone and dialed the number she'd been avoiding for weeks, the lawyer's office. It was time to take control of her future. She needed to make sure Emily couldn't hurt her again, couldn't tear her life apart any further. As she waited for the call to connect, Martha's mind drifted to the events of the past few days. Emily had tried desperately to turn the family against her. She'd called Luke, whispered accusations, and tried to paint Martha as unstable, as a threat to the family's harmony. But Emily had underestimated the one thing she hadn't counted on: Martha's strength. Luke hadn't found Len for it. Despite Emily's desperate pleas, he had begun to see the truth. Martha had waited a long time for that moment, for Luke to finally see her, to finally understand that she wasn't the one causing the chaos. The chaos had always been there, hidden beneath Emily's perfect facade. "Martha," Luke had said the other night, his voice quieter than it had ever been before. "I was wrong. I should have listened to you sooner. I didn't see it." That admission had been a small victory, but it was still a victory, and for the first time Martha felt like she could finally breathe. The call connected, and Martha wasted no time. She set up a meeting with the lawyer to update her will and discuss how to protect her assets. She wouldn't leave anything to chance. Emily would not take what was rightfully hers, not her home, not her life. The following morning, Luke came to her with an apology, his voice raw with regret. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see what was happening. I let her do this and I didn't stand by you. I won't make that mistake again." Martha looked at him, her heart heavy but resolute. She had wanted to hear those words for so long, but now they didn't feel as satisfying as she thought they would. The damage had been done. Still, she nodded, her voice quiet but firm. I appreciate that, Luke, but I need to take control of my life now, and that means making some big changes. She could see the weight of those words settle on him, the realization that things would never be the same. Emily's manipulation hadn't just fractured their relationship, it had fractured their entire family. After the meeting with her lawyer, Martha returned home, a new sense of purpose filling her chest. She wasn't the victim anymore, she was in charge. As she walked through the door, she felt the familiar tension of the house settle around her. But this time, it didn't suffocate her. She had the power to change things. She had the power to protect herself. And with that, Martha made a final decision. No matter what Emily tried, she would never allow herself to be silenced again. The storm wasn't over, but now it was Martha's storm to weather. The weight of the truth had finally settled in, but Emily wasn't done yet. She couldn't just let go, she wouldn't. Martha could feel it in the air, the tension thick enough to choke on. Emily, cornered by her own lies, had one last card to play. That evening, Emily came to Martha in the living room, her expression tight, her voice trembling with what she hoped would be feigned vulnerability. Martha, I can't believe you're doing this. I was only trying to help you, Emily began, the familiar false sweetness coating her every word. I've always been here for you. You've been so confused, so overwhelmed, and now, after everything I've done, you're turning on me. Martha's stomach turned. Emily was still trying to play the victim, still trying to twist the truth to make herself look like the one who'd been wronged. Martha didn't flinch. She had seen it all before, and this time it didn't move her. Instead, she stood up slowly, the quiet strength in her movements radiating through the room. Don't play the victim, Emily. I'm done with that. You've been manipulating me, trying to isolate me, trying to turn everyone against me for your gain. I see it now. You don't get to twist this anymore. Emily's face tightened with fury, but Martha's gaze didn't waver. She had spent far too long hiding in the shadows of Emily's control, not anymore. Luke stood in the doorway, silent as a statue. The shift in him was unmistakable. The moment he had been avoiding for so long had come, and Emily's facade was finally crumbling under the weight of his gaze. His eyes flickered between Martha and Emily, and he could no longer ignore the truth that had been right in front of him all along. Emily, Luke's voice was calm, but it cut through the tension like a knife. This has gone too far. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. You've been lying, manipulating everyone around you, and I can't let you do it anymore. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of realization. Emily's mouth opened, but no words came. She tried to rally to defend herself, but the evidence was undeniable. She had been caught. Her face flushed with anger, her eyes flashing as she turned to Luke. You're going to believe her over me? After everything I've done for this family, I've only ever tried to help, she cried, but her voice cracked, betraying her desperation. Luke stepped forward, his face etched with regret. I can't ignore what's been happening anymore, Emily. I can't pretend it's okay. You've pushed my mother away, lied to me, and tried to control everything. I can't be a part of that. The room was silent, the weight of Luke's words pressing down on all of them. Emily's composure shattered completely. Her lips trembled, her fists clenched at her sides, but there was no escape now. Martha remained calm, every inch of her filled with quiet, resolute power. Emily had tried to control the narrative for so long, but Martha wasn't going to let her do it anymore. Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Officer Ryan stepped inside, his presence authoritative yet calm. I've spoken to the department, Ryan said, his voice cutting through the tense air. We're taking this seriously, Emily. Your actions are being investigated. It's not just family drama anymore. Emily's eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. This is ridiculous. You're all turning against me. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice rising with frustration. Martha stood still, unwavering. No, Emily, it's over. You're not going to manipulate anyone anymore. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. The room was thick with silence, and all Martha could do was breathe, feeling the years of tension, of lies and manipulation finally begin to unravel. Slowly, Luke stepped forward, his eyes softer now, filled with regret but also a flicker of understanding. "I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't see it. I should have believed you." Martha met his gaze, and for the first time in years she felt like she was seeing him clearly, not the son she had been desperately trying to hold onto, but the man he was becoming. The family was beginning to piece itself together again, the fractures starting to heal, even if Emily's actions would leave a scar. And as Emily stood there, alone in her defeat, Martha finally felt a sense of relief wash over her. The storm had passed and the truth had come out. Now it was Emily's turn to face the consequences. The house was quieter now. The heavy tension that had once filled every room seemed to have lifted, replaced by a soft peace that Martha had long forgotten. She sat in her favorite chair by the window, looking out at the garden. The flowers, once neglected in the chaos of the past months, were now blooming with vibrant colors. It was a small thing, but it felt like a sign. Like her life was beginning to bloom again, after so long being stifled in the shadows of manipulation. The house was hers again. It wasn't just the walls and the furniture, it was her space, her life. For the first time in what felt like forever, Martha felt truly at home. Luke had been by a few times, his visits frequent and full of regret, but also a growing sense of healing. He was working to rebuild what had been lost. Martha knew it would take time, that the road ahead wouldn't be without bumps, but she appreciated his effort. The apology had been difficult for him, but it was sincere. Martha had to acknowledge that. He was showing up now in ways he hadn't before. "I know I can't make up for what happened, but I want to try," Luke had told her the other day, his voice steady but vulnerable. "You're my mom. I've been blind to everything, but I'm ready to see it now." Martha smiled softly, her heart warmed by his words, though it still hurt. She had to take it one day at a time. The road to rebuilding their relationship was long, but they were both walking it now. As if on cue, the doorbell rang and Martha's heart lifted as she heard the familiar sound of her granddaughter, Hannah, laughing outside. The young woman Martha had always loved like her own daughter had grown up so much in the past year, but there was still a sense of joy and excitement that Hannah brought with her every time she visited. "Grandma," Hannah's voice filled the entryway before the door even opened. She rushed inside, her smile lighting up the room. "I missed you so much." Martha's heart swelled. She opened her arms and Hannah rushed into them, enveloping her in a hug that felt like the kind of embrace that could heal old wounds. Hannah had always been a bridge between Martha and Luke. Her presence was a reminder of what truly mattered. "Missed you too, sweetheart," Martha said softly, holding her close. As they sat together, sipping tea and talking about everything and nothing, Martha felt a deep sense of gratitude. It was small moments like this, simple, full of love, that made her realize how much she had fought for and how much she had regained. The world had been trying to take her dignity, her voice, but she had fought back, and now she was surrounded by the people who truly mattered. Carla, as always, had been a constant pillar of support. She had been the friend Martha leaned on when things got dark, the one who urged her to keep fighting. Now Carla was visiting more often, sharing in the quiet celebrations of Martha's newfound peace. They sat on the porch together in the evenings, chatting, laughing, savoring the calm that had eluded them both for so long. Martha couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. Emily was no longer at the center of their lives, no longer holding power over their family. There was still healing to do, and the scars would never fully disappear, but for the first time, Martha wasn't afraid. As she sat with her family that evening, planning a small gathering to bring everyone together again, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that this would be different. It would be a new chapter for them all, a chapter where, for once, the future was bright. But even as the warmth of the evening settled over them, Martha knew the past wasn't easily forgotten. It wasn't just about getting her life back, it was about reclaiming her voice. And with each passing day, she was reminded that she was no longer the quiet woman in the corner, hidden from view. She was the one in control. Martha sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, staring out at the morning sun that was now streaming through the window. The warmth on her skin felt foreign but welcome, like a new beginning that had slowly been creeping into her life. The quiet that filled the house was no longer oppressive, it was comforting. It was hers. Her mind had been clear in a way it hadn't been in years. For so long, she had been clouded by fear, by the subtle manipulations of Emily, by her own doubts about whether she had the strength to stand up for herself. But now, she could see the world with fresh eyes. Martha had always loved painting, but it had been something she had pushed aside for years. The demands of family, the pressure to always be the caretaker, the quiet whispers from Emily telling her she wasn't capable, those had all kept her from doing what she loved. But now she was pulling out her old brushes, dipping them in vibrant colors and splashing them onto the canvas. She had rediscovered a part of herself, one that she had forgotten in the chaos of the past. Her art was more than a hobby, it was her sanctuary, her voice in a world that had tried to silence her. As the days passed, Martha began to plan more for herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. She signed up for painting classes at the local community center. She started gardening again, her hands deep in the soil, planting the seeds for both flowers and a future that was hers to shape. She felt lighter, more grounded. The weight of Emily's presence in her life had been lifted, and with it came a sense of liberation that Martha had never fully understood until now. Luke's visits became more frequent. He came over not just to apologize but to spend time with her, to listen to her, to really see her. He had changed, and it showed in the way he respected her boundaries, the way he no longer let Emily's shadow linger between them. He had learned the hard way, but Martha was grateful for the effort he was putting in. The relationship they had once shared was evolving, and it was stronger now, built on a foundation of mutual respect. "How's your garden coming along?" Luke asked one afternoon as they sat together on the porch, the air warm with the promise of summer. "It's getting there," Martha replied, smiling as she picked up a sprig of mint from the small herb garden by the steps. "I've decided to plant roses this year, they've always been my favorite." Luke nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You're doing more for yourself now, huh?" Martha met his gaze, her eyes steady. "Yes, I am." Emily had become a distant memory. The woman who had once held so much control over Martha's life now seemed like a shadow in the distance, fading with every passing day. Martha didn't fear her anymore. Emily's power had been nothing but an illusion, and Martha had shattered it piece by piece. It was a strange relief, knowing that she would never again be manipulated by someone who never truly cared for her. Carla, ever the steadfast friend, was still by her side, celebrating each small victory with Martha. The two of them spent countless evenings sitting on the porch, laughing, reminiscing, and sharing their dreams. Carla had never wavered in her support, and Martha was more grateful for her than ever. As the days turned into weeks, Martha found herself reflecting more and more on the journey she had been through. The woman she had been, the one who had allowed herself to be pushed aside, felt like a stranger now. She had learned what it meant to truly stand up for herself, to trust her instincts, and to claim her place in the world without apology. The scars were still there, but they were no longer her defining feature. Martha had fought for her life back, and now, for the first time in a long time, she was living it fully. As she gazed out over the garden, the sun setting behind her, Martha couldn't help but smile. The future was hers, and it was brighter than she ever imagined. It had been weeks since Emily's defeat, since the weight of her manipulations had finally been lifted. The air in the house was still peaceful, but Martha knew it couldn't stay that way forever. Emily, though pushed out, wasn't finished. She wasn't one to accept defeat quietly. The phone call came on a quiet afternoon. Martha was in the garden, her hands deep in the soil, planting a new row of daisies. The familiar ring of her phone snapped her out of her thoughts. She wiped her hands on her apron before picking up. "Martha, it's Emily," came the voice on the other end, smooth, deceptively calm. I've been thinking a lot. I know things have been difficult between us and I've made mistakes. I want to make it right. I want to apologize for everything I did. Please, can we talk?" The words hit Martha like a storm cloud. Emily's tone was polished, but there was a subtle desperation beneath it. She was trying to get back in. She was trying to manipulate her way into Martha's life again, weaving her web of false concern. Martha set the phone down on the porch railing, her heart steady. She wasn't going to fall for this, not anymore. She had been down this road before, and it always ended in the same place, Emily trying to control her life. Her hand reached for the phone again, and with a firm voice she replied, "Emily, no, there's nothing to talk about. What happened between us is over. I don't have any place for you in my life anymore." There was a long pause on the other end. Martha could almost hear Emily's mind working, trying to come up with the next line of attack, but Martha stood firm, her feet planted in the soil beneath her. This time, Emily wouldn't get away with it. "Martha, please," Emily's voice cracked, and for a moment it almost sounded genuine, like the woman who had once been part of her life. But Martha had learned that these cries were just another manipulation. "No," Martha said again, her voice unwavering. "I've let you control me long enough. You've hurt me and you've hurt this family. It's over. I'm moving on with my life." She could feel the finality in her words. This was the last step. Emily's attempts to destroy her, to push her into a corner, were over. Martha wasn't weak anymore, she wasn't the victim. She was strong and she was ready to take back control. When Martha hung up the phone, the weight of it all felt lighter. She wasn't running from the past. She wasn't cowering in fear. Emily's toxic influence no longer had a hold over her, and that was something Emily couldn't take back. Luke walked out from the house, his face open, relieved. "I heard you talking to her," he said, his voice softer than it had been in the past. "I agree with you, Mom. She's not welcome here anymore. I won't tolerate it, not after everything she's done." Martha nodded, her eyes meeting his. It was a quiet moment, but it was a powerful one. For the first time, Martha could see the man her son had become, one who stood by her, not just in words but in action. The fracture between them was starting to heal, and it was a long, hard road ahead, but they were on it together. The phone call from Emily was the last attempt to break them, but Martha stood tall and her family stood with her. As Emily's name faded into the past, Martha felt something stir inside of her. The fear was gone, the power had shifted, and it wasn't with Emily anymore, it was with Martha, and for the first time in years she felt truly free. With the weight of Emily's manipulations finally lifted, Martha looked forward to the future, ready to build a new life, a life that was truly hers, and one that no one would be able to take from her again. Martha stood in the center of her living room, her hands resting on the arm of the old chair that had been with her for years, the one she used to retreat to when things got difficult. It was the same chair, the same room, but everything felt different now. The walls no longer felt like they were closing in. Instead, the sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm, golden light across the furniture, the floors, and her soul. For the first time in a long time, Martha felt truly at peace. She had fought for this, fought against Emily's manipulations, fought for her dignity, fought for her family, and now, standing in this room, it all felt worth it. The storm had passed. The chaos that had once ruled her life was gone, replaced by the calm she had longed for. She had learned something about herself in this process, something important. Martha was stronger than she ever realized, stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. She had been told for so long that she was fragile, that she couldn't handle the weight of her own life, but she had proven everyone wrong. Most of all, she had proven it to herself. Luke had been with her every step of the way, standing beside her as she rebuilt not just their relationship but her entire life. He had come to understand her strength, her resilience, in a way he never had before. They had their difficult moments, their conversations full of regrets and apologies, but now he was a different man. The way he supported her, the way he respected her decisions, it spoke volumes. No longer a passive bystander in his own life, Luke had become her partner in this new chapter. "Mom," he said to her one evening as they sat together on the porch, the last rays of the sun dipping below the horizon, "I'm proud of you. I don't think I ever really understood what you went through before, but I see it now. I see how strong you are." Martha had looked at him then, her heart full of love and gratitude. It wasn't just about the apology, it was about understanding, about healing. "It's not just me, Luke," she had replied softly. "We're healing together, all of us." Carla, too, had been a constant in Martha's life, offering her unwavering support, celebrating each small victory along the way. They had laughed together, cried together, and in those quiet moments of reflection, Carla had become more than just a friend. She was a sister, a guardian of Martha's heart. The two of them spent evenings on the porch, savoring the silence that had once been so uncomfortable, now filled with shared stories and easy laughter. "I've never seen you like this before," Carla had remarked one afternoon as they sat in the garden, surrounded by the flowers Martha had carefully tended to. "You're blooming, Martha, you're finally blooming." And Martha was, in every way that mattered, she was blooming. The pain, the manipulation, the doubt, it was all part of her past now. She had moved beyond it. She had grown beyond it. As the days turned into weeks, Martha found herself enjoying the simple pleasures of life, the quiet mornings, the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of birds chirping in the distance. There were no more whispers of manipulation, no more schemes lurking behind every corner. It was just peace. Her family, once fractured by lies and deceit, was finding its way back together. The wounds were healing. Slowly, surely, they were healing. And as Martha walked through her home, once a prison, now a sanctuary, she knew she was no longer a prisoner. Emily's shadow had finally been banished from her life. And as Martha stood in her garden one evening, looking at the vibrant flowers she had planted, the wind lifting her hair, she knew something deep within herself. "They thought they could trap me in the basement," Martha whispered to herself, her voice steady with triumph, "but I always had the key." For the first time in a long time, Martha wasn't afraid anymore. She was free.